and the sunshine is upon us. So very exciting times. It's great to see lots of you joining us in our virtual festival tent or Zoom as we kick off 3 weeks of, we hope, inspiration and learning. We have over 20 really great charities that are very keen to share some of their amazing digital projects and solutions they've created during what's been a really challenging year. So we have an ongoing poster exhibition, and we'll share some links in a bit. We've got a number of one-to-one digital coffee sessions led by the charities themselves, so you can find out more about the great work they've been doing. So please do take a look at our festival program, our festival webpage, and start booking some coffee sessions after this event, hopefully on the back of a really insightful and interesting session. I'm David. I'm a strategic partnerships at CAST, the Center for the Acceleration of Social Technology. It's easier to say CAST. And I'll be hosting this session alongside my good colleagues, Joyce, who's Digital Practice and Learning Associate. Hi, Joyce, wherever you are, at the back of the tent somewhere, and Alicia, our events manager, and both have been working tirelessly the last few weeks behind the scenes to make all this happen. So really warm thanks to them. And you may have noticed that this is a Catalyst event. Catalyst is a network of organizations helping UK charities grow in digital skills, knowledge, and capability. The agenda for today, we've got a packed 56 minutes. We will be starting with a quick welcome and a group check-in. And then we're joined by 4 very special guests who are going to share some of their stories and help us make better sense of what we mean by reuse, and hopefully inspire you to all become digital reuse champions by 2 o'clock this afternoon. So we'll have time for some Q&A session, and we'll kind of share some of the links we'll be using for collating some of your questions throughout the session. And I think there's quite a few of you that have joined us, lots of different organizations from different sectors. It would be lovely to do a quick, just get a bit of a sense of who's with us. It'll also help the different speakers get a sense of like who they're talking to. So I'd like to suggest doing a quick group check-in. We will be using Slido. Bit of housekeeping before we do that. Sorry, we will be using Slido to collate questions and to do a couple of live polls. You'll see the link in the chat, and we are also recording the session for those who couldn't make it. I think we've got close to 85 registered, and we've got 45 so far, so we will be sharing the recording after the session. So hopefully you've all got access to the Slido link in the chat. And we would just want to run a couple of polls. The first one is a very important question about your superpower. We are talking about one specific type of superpower today. There are lots of different superpowers out there, and I'd love to know what you're all into, really. I'll read the answers for those who may not have access to Slido. So what superpower would you like to have? Teleportation to a sunny beach, time travel back to the 90s, flying, could be anywhere, Mars, or just over to the corner shop, DJing and MCing, which is a bit of a recurrent theme throughout this session, as we'll hear from the Beats Bus team, or we should have one on reuse. We have, reuse digital tools and solutions, the most important superpower of all. So 30 of you have responded, which is great. I think you get 2 votes. So please do use your second vote and push up that reuse digital tools bracket, because that's what we're here for today. But it sounds like the majority of you would rather just be teleported right now to Sunny Beach. So I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. And a few more now would really like to have the superpower of reuse. For that, we can help you, and hopefully the session will help you with that. And good to see that there's a bit of interest in DJing and MCing, Steve and Dave from BeatsBus. So a bit of work to do on getting more enthusiasm for that bracket, but fantastic. Thanks for doing that. The second poll is really just a bit of real-time data capture for us. Lots of different organizations from different sectors. We'd love to find out what type of organization you're from. The different categories we've gone for this event is charity, social enterprise, community interest company, and cooperative. digital data design agencies, a funding body, or another one which we may have missed, as well as community group. If you are from another type of organization, it would be lovely to know which one you're from. If you could add that in the chat in your own time, that would be great. Just having a quick look. Nothing yet. So majority, you probably see the results you're in. We've got 76% charities, which is good because this is really you know, the main target audience were charities, but it's also wonderful to see some digital data design agencies joining us, because they're a key part of really building this culture of reuse, as well as some social enterprises or community interest companies and cooperatives, and one or two funders, which is lovely. Hopefully this also sparks your interest. And thanks, Christina, for adding in the chat a local authority trading company. So great, thanks. Good to have a representative from local government too. That's great. And arts and culture, Rob, thank you. Fantastic. Good. I'm catching my breath. I think we're in a good position to move over to the main act on the main stage. We have 3 talks lined up. We'll hear from first talk, we'll hear from Chris Thorpe, who's head of technology at CAST. We're also going to hear from Sarah Fernandez from Oxford Hub, and Dave and Steve from BeatsBus. But I'm very happy to introduce you first of all to Chris. Chris is head of technology at CAST. And I'd like to add, he's our very own reuse guru in a way. By day, he's helping to bring about better charity digital services through reuse across the UK. And by night, he's busy reusing and adapting some great tunes, like the one we heard earlier, into some carefully crafted DJ sets. So a true reuse champion, and no one better really to set the scene for this event and the theme today. So over to you, Chris.
It's lovely. Thanks, David. Really lovely to meet you all. Wish we could all be in a lovely big tent or a meeting room at the moment. Hopefully next year, and then we can all maybe have a dance afterwards as well, which would be great. So what's this wonderful thing that we're calling a superpower in reuse? It's really simple. It's been in the world since time began, really, and since we started inventing technology. We've always reused things that other people have done before us. It's happened in culture, it's happened in some of the startups that we see around us today. And what we really want to do is get more of it happening in the charity sector. So next slide, please. This is where I get to sound horribly like Chris Whitty at a briefing at Downing Street. So what do we mean by reuse? What is this term? Well, actually, it's super simple. It's where one organization uses something that another organization of any sort has created and made available for sharing. And one really important thing about reuse is that adapting it to your own users and their needs and behaviors and expectations is absolutely part of it. And sometimes, you know, adapting your organization to the tool is another part of it. And we'll hear a bit more about these things later on today. Next slide, please. So what are the goals? Why do we want reuse to happen? Well, the answer is that the more things we reuse, the less things we have to make. We're not being lazy. We're just trying to be smarter with the scarce resources that the charity sector has to deal with. So the more we reuse, the less unnecessary duplication there'll be. And the more the digital skills in the sector will go further. There'll be, you know, the best way to create capacity is not to use capacity. So that's why we want reuse to happen. Next slide, please. So, that was the same one. Lovely. So why do we want to reuse? Well, actually, most of the time it saves money. It's often cheaper to reuse something that exists in the world than to make something new. It reduces risk. I'm a software engineer and I know that creating software makes things inherently risky. Next slide, please. So why don't we reuse? Well, one reason why we don't reuse is because we don't know what's out there, what's available. We don't know how to use it. Most importantly, we don't know if we're allowed to use it. And part of the work that we've been doing over the last year is getting the charity sector used to these things called open licenses and Creative Commons. And what that means is that you're allowed to use it at the point of creation. So as soon as someone's made it available to you, you can use it. And in terms of what's out there, we've been working on things like service recipes and the open resources that I'll point at later, and the lovely posters that you can go and see as well. Next slide, please. So we did a bit of research about 1.5 years ago about reuse within the charity sector with a lovely organization called the Engine Room. And what we found was that it helped charities make things quicker. It helped them in their confidence massively, and it helped connect them to others doing the same sort of thing. So it created like peer networks, which are really important. And we've seen even more of that through the work that we've been doing recently, funded by the lottery, that our lovely speakers and most of our posters have been part of. Next slide, please. So I said that reuse is all around us, and I'm going to talk to you a tiny bit about where there is reuse that you may have encountered, but you might not have noticed. Next slide, please. So the first one is Shopify. So Shopify is an e-commerce platform. It powers as much commerce on the internet as Amazon does. So it's huge. Interestingly, they're a good example of reuse. They actually reused an existing e-commerce platform when they started and used it to prototype with, something we'll hear about later on. And only when they were certain that they could make a better one did they actually move forward. Next slide, please. Now, as well as the sort of like the work that Shopify do, then Stripe powers most of the payments on the internet as well. So whenever you checked out, you probably had Stripe in the background. And one of the reasons for using Shopify and Stripe is they handle all the fraud and all the risk, and they have security teams that you could never afford to have, but they're pretty cheap to use. So this is why I can say it's going to be cheaper to actually reuse stuff, because you could never afford all of the infrastructure that sits behind all of these things. Next slide, please. In the real world, in the physical world, you'll have probably seen some of these. So cafes and markets are full of these iZettle or SumUp readers. You might not necessarily notice them because it's just a thing you tap your card on. But if you're a charity taking payments in the real world, you could get one of these, and they're really super easy to use. Next one, please. And this is quite pertinent. So if you have received a message recently from government or NHS or local government, you've probably had it sent to you by GovUK Notify. Next slide, please. So GovUK Notify is a service which lets parts of government send messages to citizens. Over 5,500 services are using it. It's sent over 1.6 billion messages in the last 12 months. So it's huge. And if you've had a reminder about your vaccination, that will have come through Notify. Next slide, please. And because we know that charities send lots of messages, we've got a bit of news today, which is a lovely agency called BitZesty has worked with the open source code for GovUK Notify, and we are launching an alpha test of Notify's new sibling, which is just for the charity sector. So now charities can sign up to the alpha test and send messages securely and easily to their users. So if you're interested, do get in touch with the team. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the types of reuse. And I think there are 3 main categories. So one is reusing something that's out there in the world already. BeatsBus are going to tell us a great story about this. Some of these things don't actually require technology skills, some do, but actually using something that exists already is much cheaper and lower risk, and there's lots of it you can do yourself. Next one. So reusing something to prototype a service. So we talk a lot about rapid prototyping and testing your riskiest assumptions, and actually when you're doing that, it's best to reuse. The reason being is that there's minimal cost to you. If you're doing something with what we call software as a service, which is something where you pay a monthly fee to use a thing, you can just discontinue it if it doesn't work. And the great thing is that if things do work or don't work, it doesn't matter. You take the learnings that you found from doing that riskiest assumption test with your users into building a better product. And both Oxford Hubs and BeatsBus have done some of this sort of stuff. And then next one, please. And the final one is the boss level one. This is great. This is where you've made a bespoke product for a really specific need and you've tested it with your users. And what you do is something rather marvelous. And you say, well, actually, it's not just for us. Other people could use this. And the way you release it is under what's known as an open source license, which basically says anybody who wants to can use this again. And we're sort of spreading that a bit further by saying that the personas and user need statements and things like that that you create along the way are also really useful. So let's make those open too. And look out later on today, because we've got something quite interesting, we think, for digital agencies and charities to work on together around what are the user needs around long COVID. So that's the boss level reuse. And thanks to Oxford Hub and Scouts and other people who've made their stuff available. So here's a list of some resources. I said there'd be some places for you to start. The first one's the Festival of Learning posters. You can learn a huge amount there, and you can go and have coffees with the charities and ask them questions. We mentioned service recipes. It's a catalogue of easy to follow reuse guides for you to use. If you use them, then please let us and the charities who created them know, and then we can make better ones. And if you create something really interesting yourself, email me, because I'll be looking after recipes for a while, and we'll talk about how you can create a recipe. And then also, if you remix something, if you change it, we talked about sort of mutating things a bit and, you know, changing them a bit. Talk about that. That makes an interesting recipe too. We said that a whole load of charities have been working openly. There's over 100 charities who've been doing that, and they've been sharing their outputs. So there's a lovely, very long web page of all sorts of things that you can take and use. Week notes of where people are talking about their journey. It's over 700 things being shared at the moment by charities, which is just marvelous. And then next slide, please. I'm going to go left for a moment and talk about the best bit of reuse that I think has had a massive, massive effect on society, which is hip hop. So hip hop is the perfect example of reuse. Started in 1973 when DJ Kool Herc took the turntables he already had and a mixer and had the first hip hop party. He reused the things around him, the beats and the music and the equipment, to create this whole new genre. Next slide, please. And the track that you heard at the start is a bit of reuse itself. So one of my favorite bands, Kraftwerk, the 4 geeky guys from Dusseldorf, created Trans-Europe Express, which was then taken by Afrika Bambaataa to create Planet Rock. And that track has influenced so much of the music in our charts and the music around us, and it's all down to reuse. So if ever you think, oh, what difference will I make by reusing something? Just think of that, because actually you might start something huge. That's what we really hope, that this will just fan out and have a really big effect on the charity sector, just as DJ Kool Herc in 1973 had on music today. And next slide, please. So that's enough of me waffling on about hip hop. We've got some real stars who are going to talk to us about it better. So I'm going to hand over to Oxford Hub and BeatsBus, and please don't forget to go and see the posters. Thank you all. Lovely to see you all.
Wonderful, Chris. A round of applause for Chris. I feel like you need a walk-off music, hip-hop music, and also DJ set at the end of the session would be lovely. But thanks so much for explaining so clearly what reuse is and why we think it's so important, and a great use of day-to-day examples of how reuse is actually all around us. We just don't really notice it. And already some great resources there with the Catalyst service recipes and open working pages to hopefully, signpost people who are interested in finding out more to those great resources. If you have any questions for Chris, please do post them in Slido. The link is in the chat. You just need to select audience Q&A when you're on your Slido dashboard and add any questions. And please also feel free to upvote questions as they start coming through, because we'll probably won't be able to go through all of them depending on how many we get. And if you've got any other comments or reflections, please do use the Zoom chat. It'd be lovely to hear how everyone's doing, because I can't really see anyone, and it's nice to see how things are going. But on to the our second guest speaker. I'm really happy to introduce Sara Fernandez, also known as Sarah, who's CEO at Oxford Hub, which is a wonderful place-based charity that brings people and organizations together to build a better city. And Sarah is really passionate about the ways in which this work can grow and develop with the help of better digital tools. And I've had the pleasure of collaborating with Sarah and her team the past year, and been really inspired about how they're really making that happen at Oxford Hub. And she's now going to share with us some of the learnings and outcomes from Oxford Hub's participation in the Catalyst and the National Lottery Community Fund COVID-19 Digital Response Program. So over to you, Sarah.
Amazing. Thanks, David. Thanks for giving the long title of the fund that I can never get in the right order. So that's very helpful. Can I have the next slide, please, Alicia? Brilliant. So this is what we built working with David and our partner digital agency Oxford Code Lab. It is a platform to manage phone links, which is a friendship program that happens mostly on the phone, as it says. And I don't want to talk in detail about the process, but you can go and check out our Festival of Learning poster and learn more about the program and what we did with it and the journey for development. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our experience of reuse through phone links and our plans for the future, just so that we can talk about what we have learned and the barriers along the way, and hopefully others can learn and explore reuse in their context. So phone links sets up those relationships between people, someone who maybe is finding life a little bit hard at the minute, or who just wants a little bit of practical support, or company receives phone calls from someone who has had some training from us to be a really good listener and a really supportive and encouraging friend. It was based on a lot of the work that we had been doing for years and years as an organization, growing relationships between people in Oxford. However, it really grew as a result of COVID. So we thought, actually, we cannot continue to meet in person and do all of these events. So let's move everything to the phones. And that happened really, really, really quickly. So by the 1st of April last year, we were matching people for phone friendships. And it was a week shortly after national lockdown started. But in order to do that, we were reusing left, right, and center tools that were at our disposal. So a lot of Google Forms and Google Spreadsheets, a little bit of Asana thrown in, and really a prototype used fully with off-the-shelf tools that are either very, very cheap for charities or free, and that enabled us to grow very, very quickly at a pace without having a plan. We didn't even know that we were going to be running like a phone friendship scheme. So the program grew a lot over the first few months of lockdown. But we soon found the limitation of all of our reusing of Google Form and Asana, which is that as we grew things in a very distributed way, where lots of volunteer leaders were taking care of other volunteers, digital skills across that pool of people were varied. Because it was on the phone, we had a huge proportion of older volunteers, which is less of our predominant demographic. And so digital skills were, mixed on the cohort as a whole. So things on Google Forms and Google Spreadsheets were breaking quite frequently. So I think what was really, really positive is that we had learned what was working. So by the time we came on to work with CAST and our digital agency, Oxford Code Lab, we sort of already knew what we needed to do, because we had sort of done the messy and dirty version with Google Forms, and we could build quite quickly from there. So what you see on that slide are some of the screenshots from the digital platform that we use. So we currently have 178 matches as of this morning. Some of those have come and gone over the year, but they have made 7,294 phone calls over the past year. And what is most amazing is that before we did all of this work with CAS, we really had such little visibility of the data day to day. And so reusing off-the-shelf tools was great, but we were really quite limited in terms of analytics and in terms of actually understanding what was going on. So by having something that is a bit more built from Google Forms, but actually much more structured and bespoke, we have locked the quality of the program. It doesn't break as much when an enterprising volunteer thinks, oh, I'm just going to change this spreadsheet, that then has a knock-on effect on every other spreadsheet that talks onto that spreadsheet. And it has actually made our digital services way more accessible for people who maybe don't have as high digital skills. So onboarding the users, I thought, oh, this is going to be challenging. But actually, we were very user-led from the beginning. People were involved in moving from Google Forms to this bespoke platform. So it has worked surprisingly well. What the project has given us is a lot of confidence in our ability to build digital products, and actually a realization that in many ways, we've run a service before, and on the whole, we know what we're doing when we're doing things on Google Forms. So actually bringing in this digital extra layer is just the cherry on top. We have given a lot of thought to the analytics that we can now get to make sure that we get real-time information for service improvement. And that is really, really exciting. So for example, now when someone logs a call, they say, this is how I thought the call went for me. So maybe the person I was calling was suicidal, but I was very well prepared for that. Or maybe the phone call was great, but I wasn't feeling very well. And then they also rate how the person they were calling was feeling, and that generates like a magic support index. And the platform itself gives you like the highlights of who maybe has a low score across those things at the moment, who is someone who needs that support. So we're really excited about how this will enable us to improve our services, but also how other organizations can use it. We've been approached by 2 other organizations who are exploring how they might roll the PhoneLinks platform, one within Oxfordshire and one outside of Oxfordshire, which is really exciting. And I think that it's been really good working with CUS just to learn how to put this out there in a way that other people can use it. And we are also embarking on a reuse journey ourselves. So through the CUS program, we met some people who have developed a resource hub, and we thought, oh, we really, really need like a bit of a learning platform for resources. So we actually emailed CAS saying, really like your new website, and what we really need is the resources section of your website. And so if you're really into reuse, can we please reuse your website? And they said, well, actually you can, and there is a group of people who are doing it. So we're still learning how to do it. I think it's given us the confidence to ask, to say, hey guys, can you help us with this? And do you know who has done it and how could we do it? We still have to learn a bit more. So what is the lingo? What are the practicalities of reuse? What does it actually entail? You know, this thing we want to reuse is on Drupal. Our developers don't do Drupal. Okay, so how do we go about it? So we're still very much on that learning journey, but feeling really excited and very well supported by a community of other charities and digital agencies who are sort of on board with this philosophy. So yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Lovely and bang on time. So fantastic. And yeah, really, really inspiring. I really like how, you know, instead of going, we think the solution is this, and we're going to spend loads of money on expensive development work. You know, you've tested out what you call the messy and dirty version first, which I really liked. You know, that happened to be free and available. It was a Google spreadsheet. So through that journey, you've kind of grown in confidence and understanding to build something, you know, better, more refined. And it's been great to see all that come to life throughout the Catalyst program too. So looking forward to seeing what comes next through hopefully some future collaboration. If you've got any questions for Sarah, you know the deal. Please post them on Slido. We've got a few coming through. Please also upvote if there's a question you really want us to ask, because we will be a little bit pushed for time. And a bit of anything else you'd like to share, please use the chat. I can see there's a few questions and conversations happening in the chat too. So thanks, Bobby and Chris, for posting that. Right, last but not least, I'm really excited to introduce you to Stephen Arnott and Dave Aquasia, co-founders and CEO of BeatsBus. BeatsBus help young people in Hull express themselves through creativity like hip hop, break, dance, graffiti, MCing and DJing. And they've also been part of the Catalyst and the National Lottery Community Fund COVID-19 Digital Response Program. And they're going to share how they went about sort of pivoting their DJing tutorial from what used to be in-person sessions to online tutorials. So lovely to have you with us, Steve and Dave. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve.
And I'm David, and we are founders of the BeatsBus Records. We are an award-winning team of hip-hop artists, now tutors from Kingston upon Hull. To date, we have, in the last 4 years since we've been set up, we have gained 7 awards in 4 years. The recent being the Expect Citizens Award in Stoke, the Welcome Award, a couple of months ago. So we're very elated with that. But due to COVID, we've had to rethink our model and make our mentorship available online. But thanks to Catalyst, we have been able to achieve this.
So when we started out the first stage of Catalyst, the discovery phase, we thought we was going to make an online app. But as we got to the definition program, we realized that an online app doesn't have much human connection, and that is really important in how we teach. So after user research, we decided to take a different approach and design an online workshop, and this is how we did it. Elise, could we have our poster, please?
So while we picked our DJing for our prototype, we chose DJing for our prototype because it was one of the most popular elements that we teach. Also, the art form of DJing has a massive link with the power of reuse.
So as Chris explained earlier, DJ Kool Herc in 1973 in America threw hip hop parties. And what he did, he used to have two turntables with vinyl, and he'd play the vinyl and he'll find a piece of music in the vinyl that was called the break. Now this was where all the music dropped out and just the drum beat was playing. So DJ Kool Herc would find that break and he would loop it on one deck, and then he would loop it on the next deck, and he would continue to do that to make a continuous break. And people was dancing to this break, and there was formed the term break dance. This was another element of hip hop, which has worked alongside the hip hop movement, and it was made from nothing.
And as the elements grew, the elements of reuse grew within the hip hop movement. So this is a great example of creating something from nothing through the power of reuse.
So the hard stuff. This is stuff that we thought we wouldn't actually be able to do. We realized that teaching DJing online would be really difficult, as we usually teach it with human contact in our studio. And this also made us realize that just a phone app would have no human contact. And through feedback, we learned that a lot of people didn't actually have a phone and they only had laptops.
And due to the ongoing regulations of COVID, we were not able to carry out our normal DJ sessions. As we know, we DJ in groups and one-to-ones. We're quite close when we're going through all the controls and stuff on the equipment. And being DJs ourselves, we know the importance of continually improving and updating our skills. This is where we was trying to combat the whole process of how we were going to devise new ways of being able to do this.
So we realised that we've got the young people that we work with to a certain skill level, and they must continue to learn the skills. Otherwise, all the hard work that we'd done in the first place would have been for nothing, really. So this led us to decide and create the online workshop with video instructions and an online chat room function, so we could give more human contact. So dealing with it.
So to deal with this challenge, we tried and tested various software such as Miro, Zoom, and Google Slides. After about 3 weeks of testing these, we finally found the software that was perfect and compatible for what we wanted to achieve.
We also started publishing weekly blogs as we was learning and publishing our week notes. And we started receiving some feedback from other organisations on our blogs, which really gave us confidence and, made us believe in what we was trying to do. Alongside that, we created a SurveyMonkey, and we helped use that to help define the workshop and what people actually wanted in the workshop. The aha moments.
Aha moments. We discovered Google Classrooms thanks to the advice from Doug and Laura, our mentors in the Catalyst workshop, during our Catalyst training, and it was just fit like a glove. The light bulb moment of realization and clarity really helps moving forward. From the things seemed to fall into place after that.
And also a massive realization then of the tools that we already had present around us, but we simply hadn't looked into. That resource was a defining moment, as we already used Google Drive for internal communication within our business, and we paid for extra features with Google, but we just never tried Google Classroom. And we looked into that and other apps such as podcasts, blog posts, and we realized that the tools that Google was offering for free around us anyway was the ones that perfectly fitted the work that we was doing. Again, another great example of reuse.
Because trust me, when we first started on our 10-week course with Catalyst, there was, like, say, the point where I was kind of struggling and was thinking, well, you know, how are we going to design this app? You know, it's kind of was out of reach within our intelligence sort of thing. But when we kind of went into the Google classrooms and the Google tools and apps, we found that it made sense because that's how we function. We use them tools anyway, and it was very, very compatible with what we want to do, and just worked well with the tutorial that we was going to present. So we went onto our prototype, our DJ online workshop, with 12 users, all leaving great feedback, which we intend to use for our next research and development process for our next projects we're going to be doing. All users got a free download of our exclusive tracks that we release on our record label.
We did the free download because we realized that, you know, asking people to do something for nothing all the time can get exhausted and could hinder the process. And then the users even did our DJ quiz at the end, what we put on there, and said that they really enjoyed it. So what's going to be happening for us this summer?
For the next few months, we will make our DJ workshop available by booking system on a Tuesday or Thursday.
So for this booking system, that is for your live chat function. You know, we're going to make, at the end of this, we'll pop in the chat the link to our Google Classroom. Anybody can do that with the video instructions. But because of the live chat function and human connection, we want to make ourselves available to run alongside it.
We also have some brilliant releases coming out on our Beats Bus, from our Beats Bus juniors and the tutors on our Beats Bus record label. So thanks for taking time to listen to our presentation. Please visit our website and social media platforms. It's all Beats Bus. We have our Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We have our own website as well. So please join us, leave us feedback and comments, become part of our ever-growing family, because you know everyone is welcome. And you know, when we think about the future development, we, as I said, the hip hop movement within each element is a very reusable movement. They all complement each other, and as we know, it creates a hybrid for other art forms. As we know, skating's part of it. There's lots of free running's part of it. You know, so it isn't all a reusable culture. And as we move forward for our research and development, we aim to be developing another app, another classroom tutorial for the other elements as well. So look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pop the link to our Google Classroom DJ online workshop in the chat now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve and Dave. Round of applause. That's great. And what a really inspiring story and a great example of using an off-the-shelf tool. You know, it's really interesting how going through that discovery phase, you realize that an app wouldn't be the right fit. And we often think an app is the default tool or, you know, solution. And you ended up, it really sort of tested your assumptions, didn't it? And you ended up with an off-the-shelf solution like Google Classroom, which is something more user-friendly, which complements what you already had. So lovely example. And please do share the link to that tutorial, Steve and Dave. We've got a few DJ enthusiasts, as we saw in the poll.
Oh, we've popped it in the chat.
Brilliant. And just so you know, Steve and Dave, they're running digital coffee sessions. If you want to find out more, they've got 3 coming up on the 18th of May, the 20th and the 21st. And I know that Sarah and her team from Oxford Hub, I think you've got about 10 potential slots there to go and chat to Sarah and her team and find out more about their volunteering platform. So that's part of the festival. So this is just the beginning. Hopefully you can carry on those conversations with them in a one-to-one kind of coffee session. In the meantime, it would be lovely to have a bit of a chat, a discussion. There's some questions coming through Slido, which is fantastic. There's a really good opening question, I think, for we've got about 50 minutes of discussion. And I think it's one we can ask all of you. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about reuse in the charity sector? And were any of your original assumptions challenged? I think you could all have a go maybe at answering this one. Take your time. If anyone wants to go first, please go ahead. But I think this is a really good question. You know, what's surprising thing you've learned about reuse in the charity sector, having gone through this initial experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing that we learned is your original idea doesn't fit all the time. You know, you've got to be open to maneuver and change things to fit your users. Like, we start off with an idea like, oh yeah, this will be great, this will be cool, they'll love it. And then when we got our user research back, we was like, right, okay, so maybe it's not what we think is best. So user research is massively important to, you know, define the work that you're doing. I think that's our biggest learning process.
Fantastic, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. So emphasis on user research there. Chris, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great learning, you know, that sort of like your original idea doesn't necessarily work. And, you know, the best way to test out whether that idea is real is to go and talk to users, and to do that and then by spending as little money as you can, so that you've got more of it left to develop your solution. I think in terms of my reuse journey over the last year, you know, I said I gave a talk back in February that some of the slides came from. And I think my worry at that point in time was, where do we get started? Where will people start? How can we get people involved? And, you know, there's that classic phrase from Churchill about never waste a crisis, which I always used to hate. But now I've come to understand it a bit more, because actually we've all been pushed to do things that we might not necessarily have done by the pandemic, and it's been awful, but actually we've got through it and we've tried new things. And if you told me sort of February 2020 that we would have so many charities sharing stuff, making stuff open source, things like that, I probably wouldn't have quite believed you. There was lots of love for the idea in the room when I gave the talk, but it was an idea and it was something that we were pushing on. And so I think my initial assumption would be, you know, will charities start to do this? And how do we test it? Well, we just got stuck in, and it's been quite overwhelming and quite wonderful and quite emotional to see. So thank you to everyone who's jumped on and been so open about it as well, and made things available and made their stories available, and all of the outputs that they've created, because I think it's the beginnings of something really quite exciting.
Thanks very much, Chris. Yeah, really thoughtful. Thanks for sharing that. And great to know that, yeah, it's what you're saying about never waste a crisis, you know, just sort of going for it and seeing that there is an enthusiasm and appetite for it. And this is just really the beginning of a really exciting process. So lovely to see. Sarah, I wonder what's been your experience? It sounds like your experience has been positive. Any kind of surprises or learnings? Anything that you were, you know, tested your assumptions?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it for us has been about confidence. So we would have said, oh, well, we don't know, like, you know, when people talk about it's a particular language or it's built like this or it's built like that, or this is how like the code works. I was like, well, I don't know, because that's not my expertise. But actually, you soon realize that you can apply a lot of common sense, and that all of the skills that you have around how you run a program internally and what you have learned in terms of service delivery and service design is hugely applicable to the world of digital. And I think, yeah, reuse digital tools, but also reuse your own knowledge and just apply it to the digital space. Because I think, yeah, I think we were holding ourselves back a little bit in this area. And just have the confidence to ask. Like, I feel that I keep on sending emails to like either CAST colleagues or people that I meet through CAST events being like, I have this idea or I have this thought, and can you just like help me navigate the territory and help like orient me, like, you know, what do I need to know? Do I need to know what language this is built, how it is hosted, how it can be adapted, to what extent it can be adapted? So I think there is a huge willingness out there for people to help you figure out how to reuse something. So just use that willingness.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really lovely. And I think you've just, you know, reiterated that reuse is out there. It's out there in all facets of our society. It's in culture. We've talked about music. It's in retail, and absolutely no reason why we can't transfer some of that capacity to avoid duplication, to collaborate into our work and our sector. So a really nice reminder there, Sarah. I suppose building on this, this is happening. It's the beginning, but it's an exciting journey ahead. If one of our participants, for instance, is interested in adopting and adapting maybe the volunteer platform that Oxford Hub, the bespoke open source platform that they produce, thinking this could be a good thing for our service, how would they go about doing that, practically speaking? Because we might not have all the answers yet, but what would be the steps they need to take? And Sarah, you went through this with the Catalyst website, so maybe you could share a little bit of that, and then I can ask Chris and others what they think.
Yeah, so two things. I think with phone links, if you run some sort of phone friendship program or a program where people are connected, and then you just have to give them an opportunity to record that relationship. The platform is open source, so you can use it, and you can we can show you a demo. You can play on the demo site. You can just get in touch. And our partners at Oxford Code Lab are currently working out exactly what would it take for a different charity in a neighboring county to actually play with it and use it in their day-to-day services. So we will know more soon. The other example that we were thinking about is the resource hub. So I really wanted the resource page of the CAS website for a project that has been taking place in Oxfordshire around resources for people to work on equity, diversity and inclusion. So it's an opportunity for people to share resources so that we can all make more progress faster. And the last thing I wanted was to spend a lot of time building a website in which that could happen, or having something that was maybe a little bit too homemade and therefore made the resources not very appealing. So these came about by just literally emailing CAS being, can we reuse your page on the website? And there being a learning resource hub group that has come out, I think, of our development. I think, Chris, I'll pass over to you because you know where it's come out from.
Yeah, sure. So I've just dropped a link into the chat so people can have a look at the prototype. So Gilly, who's also on the call, who I want to give a shout out to, because she's been amazing supporting all of this work over the last year. And I went through a lot of applications. So all the applications that came in from charities for funding as part of the lottery work, whose long name I won't repeat again. So we looked for patterns. We looked for things that we thought were shared things. And one thing that struck us was there are a lot of charities who were providing sort of professional guidance to other charities. And originally we sort of called it a guidance repository, which was a bit boring and not the right name. But we worked with an organization called Agile Co-op, who worked with a whole load of charities to collect user needs and to define those user needs into a product. And as part of that process, all the charities agreed that resource hubs would be a better name. So that was what we've gone with. And what Agile Co-op have built is it's basically a sort of a slightly customized install of a content management system called Drupal. It's all open source. You can take it, you can install it in any of the cloud services like Google or Amazon Web Services, or Azure, or any of the smaller ones like Heroku, or specialized Drupal ones like Acquia. So you can pay someone to host it for you, and then you just start customizing it. And it's like, just changing the colors, putting your logo at the top of it, and then you're off and running. Now, we know that that's not necessarily the easiest process for some charities. So what we're trying to work out at the moment, and we'll let you know when we get there, and hopefully it won't be too long, is where you can buy the resource hub as software as a service. That's where we'd like to get to with lots of these reusable things. You heard the lovely folks from BeatsBus talking about how they paid a bit extra and they get lots of extra features from Google. That's software as a service. It's where you basically rent software. You pay a monthly fee, and it's way cheaper than actually creating the software yourself or running it yourself. So because there are economies of scale in the background. So that's where we want to get to with resource hubs. We're not quite there yet, but because it's open source, and because one of the conditions that we made on making these products was about having a thing called a README. And a README is basically an instruction for somebody to set up a version of that. So there's a really good README for resource hubs, and we pitched it so that a junior developer or a volunteer developer should be able to take the code, run it on their machine, deploy it to one of these cloud services. So that's all there. And if anyone's interested in the resource hub software, you can get in touch with me or with Jilly. Our emails were in the chat earlier, and we'll connect you up with the folks at Agile Co-op, and we'll, you know, help you work out how to get on board. So what we really want to do is get to the point where lots of these things that are shared needs of the charity sector exist in a way that you can just put your organization's details for payment into a box on a website, and then you've got the software, because that's the way we'll make the reuse happen the most. We're not quite there yet, but look how far we've come in a year. I think we'll be there sort of later on in the summer, and then we'll just look for more needs. And so, you know, this is why we're saying let's talk about what the needs are and what we want to reuse, and then we'll start building better platforms together that we can all share.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and thanks, Sarah, there for also your response earlier and sharing some of that learning. We've got a few more minutes for questions. There's a question here for Sarah, but I'd like to bring Steve and Dave into it. There's a question here about how there are many customer management programs out there, and for you, Steve and Dave, a lot of learning tools and resources, e-learning tools and resources. What decided you to develop something bespoke or not, in your case, Steve and Dave, rather than using, you know, what decided you to select Google Classroom? You mentioned the importance of user research. Was there anything else there that sort of, that aha moment you mentioned? Would you like to build on a bit of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think a big push behind it was our mentees that we work with already. So we already run 12 free mentorships for young people, and like I say, we've got them to that level before COVID, and we just realized that we needed to somehow keep them going on the training and, you know, upgrading the skills that they've done. So it was the young people that we work with that was a big push as well, you know, for us to get to be available online so they can access it. And that's, and again, another big push for us to make all the elements of hip hop available online through DJ workshops. That's what we're working at now.
And again, because we're continually in contact with our young people, even due to COVID, we still maintain that contact once, twice a week on Zoom. And we was feeling the kind of brunt of it, and like I said, the mental health was kicking in. So actually, when we started the course, that did really spring to mind straight away. Yeah. How we can meet the needs of the young people, our mentees that was mentoring. So that really catalyzed and made us really think about things.
Great, thanks, Steve and Dave. So yeah, really importance of talking to your mentees and your users and finding out what really works for them. Sarah, you obviously ended up with a bespoke solution.
Yeah.
Same process for you in terms of like that, identifying the needs of those you're supporting in the community?
Yeah, and I guess we have had previous experience. So we obviously had done the Google and Asana that breaks very easily when you scale, but on the plus side, it's really, really flexible. And as you're setting up a new service and as you're learning from your service, it's actually really handy to like wake up one morning and say, I'm just going to change the form. I'm just going to change it like this. So the flexibility that you have on something that is so off the shelf is actually amazing. As a program consolidates, you do want something which is a little bit more structured. And in the past, we had played with Salesforce. We had like 2-3 years of like very intense Salesforce life. However, we never found something that was structured enough, but also open and flexible enough, particularly because a lot of our programs are run in a very distributed manner. So we have access to the volunteers, but some volunteer leaders have access to specific information of other volunteers. So if we were to use something like Salesforce, we would need like hundreds of Salesforce licenses, which very quickly does not become feasible. So yeah, we hadn't found anything that was more like CRM-y, that was aligned with our organizational culture around openness and distributed leadership networks for volunteers taking responsibility for things, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's great, Sarah. Thanks. Chris, you're unmuted. Would you like to come in?
Yeah, I think, you know, sort of the really exciting thing for me when I heard the story about Oxford Hub is how they had done all their research and all their service design using off-the-shelf tools. They'd built the service. It was just that they hadn't turned it into software yet. And so they took all of the learnings from that prototyping and built some really lovely bespoke software. They also did some horizon scanning. They checked what was out there and found that nothing really worked for them. And then, and only then did they start building something bespoke. So I think that for me feels like the best pathway for organizations is get out there and get testing early using off-the-shelf tools, find out what your user group really want, look and see if there's anything out there that does that. If it does, then use that and carry on testing with that until eventually you might run out of steam with that as well, but you probably won't. But, if you've satisfied yourself that there's really nothing there that fits the job, then that's the point you start writing code and you start working with digital suppliers. So I think, this is very different to what, was the perceived wisdom, a few years ago. It's been like this in the world of tech startups, but in the charity sector, everyone's felt that their service that they create is so unique to them that they need to create a really unique piece of software that goes with it. And I think what this year has taught us is that actually there's loads of things out there in the world already. Try using them before you start creating something new, because you might just find something fits perfectly. And why wouldn't you go with that if it's cheaper and easier to get hold of, and someone's looking after the maintenance of it and the hosting of it and things like that. So I think it's super exciting, and so much love for the work that everyone's done in the last year, and especially our two lovely sets of speakers.
Thanks, Chris, and really nice way to wrap up this Q&A session. I just want to make sure we've got a couple of minutes for just a bit of signposting, really, hoping that this has sparked some curiosity. Hopefully you're a little bit inspired by what you've heard from Sarah, Steve, Dave, and Chris, of course. And for 3 weeks, we're going to have a festival page up and running. You've got the link in the chat. So there's an exhibition. We've got over 20 curated posters sharing insights and some really handy reusable tools from charities who've recently completed a digital project. So please go and have a look. And you can take a deeper dive too. As we mentioned earlier, if you want to learn more about a specific project, chat to Steve, Dave, or Sarah. They're around, and you can book a one-to-one digital coffee slot with them, or join one of our group learning sessions. So this is happening over the next 3 weeks. Please do make the most of this opportunity. There are some questions still on Slido there, which we weren't able to answer. This is also a great way of finding out more how those that are actually doing this, charities doing this, how they can help you hopefully unblock some of the things that are preventing you from getting stuck in. And we'll also obviously, we are also here, so please do contact us. We've got an email address, hello@thecatalyst.co.uk. I think it'd be great if we could also put that in the chat so people have it for record. And I think Chris also added his email address in the chat. So make sure you hopefully this is the start, and you've got the opportunities to find out more and have more conversations with us and some of the 20 or so charities showcasing that work. I'd like to thank, really warm thanks to Sarah, Steve, and Dave, and Chris for getting us started. We have liftoff, and it's really exciting. And I think it was such an inspiring session and stories that you shared. So thanks for taking the time to do this. Thanks to all 34 of you that are still with us, and to the 50 or so that joined earlier. We will be sharing the recording after this. And please do enjoy the festival.